This episode is sponsored by Prodigy, the free game-based math platform. Teachers, join the State Challenge, the world's biggest math competition. Over $1 million in available prizes and epic amounts of school spirit await. Learn more at prodigygame.com/state challenge. The National Council of Teachers of Mathematics welcomes you to Adding It All Up, a podcast created by and for mathematics educators and teachers. Join us each month as we explore current topics, insights, and emerging trends with thought leaders in the math community. And now, the hosts of Adding It All Up, NCTM President Latrenda Knighten and NCTM President-elect Dewey Gottlieb.
Welcome back to Adding It All Up. I'm Dewey Gottlieb, NCTM's President-elect, and I'm excited to be joining you as co-host of the podcast. But before we get started, I'd like to send a huge thank you to Kevin Dykema, NCTM's past president, for not only being a previous co-host on this podcast, but also for everything he's done to lead NCTM. I'll be taking over Kevin's role moving forward, and I'm really excited for the conversations we'll get to share together. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to share this space with someone whom I admire, current NCTM President Latrenda Knighten.
Thank you, Dewey. And we are so glad to have you on the podcast. I am excited about having the opportunity to share this space with you as well. But listeners, I have to tell you, you are in for a real treat. Dewey brings such great insight and energy, and I can't wait for you all to hear more from him in the episodes ahead.
Thanks, Latrenda. And today's episode is a great topic for me to start my journey with the podcast. Now that it's October, the school year is well underway, routines are settling in, and families are finding their rhythm. So it's the perfect time to think about how we can support families to engage with math at home every day in meaningful ways.
That's exactly correct, Dewey. And this is actually one of my favorite topics to talk about. This past July, in one of my president's messages, I was sharing a story that most math teachers or most teachers can all relate to. A lot of times we're in the presence of strangers, especially for a long time, like a 12 to 16-hour flight delay, as I encountered. You begin to share personal stories. And usually when I tell people I'm a teacher, they're excited. Oh, that's fun. Thank you so much for what you do. And then usually when I say that I teach math, story might change a little bit. Sometimes I hear about math trauma. Maybe I hear about how people never really understood math. And one of the things I've been finding out recently is that people have been sharing with me about their experiences with their own personal children in math. And one dad who I happened to share a 12-hour experience with, his story really stood out to me. Not because it was 12 hours, but he shared about his first grader. And so this is his oldest kid, and he was really worried. He said because his child excels in every content area except math. And he couldn't seem to understand why, because dad's an engineer, he uses math every day. And so we had nothing to do but talk, asking questions and asking, well, what types of things are they doing in school? What types of things do you see him bring home? And so it really realized from our discussion that his child was not having an opportunity to experience math conceptually. He wasn't having an opportunity to engage in concrete experiences. So it really gave me an opportunity to share some strategies, some tips with him, and some ideas of things that he could do at home to support his student as a learner of mathematics and really see that there's some things that families can do to help support that journey for their students. And it really made me cognizant that there are probably so many families that are having that same experience, but they're not really sure how to help their children in mathematics because you go to the library and you need a book to help your kid learn to read. But what do you do to help your child learn math?
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. Over the years, whether I was a classroom teacher or working in the district level or state level support leadership role, I've had many parents share their experiences as learners of mathematics when they're at school, and oftentimes it's not a positive memory. When their child asks them for help with math, they say things like, "Oh, I'm not a math person." We hear that so often. It's kind of a persistent reality. And a lot of parents either feel unsure or uneasy when their child comes to ask them for help with math. I remember I was giving a presentation at the Hawaii State Board of Education last year about a statewide mathematics initiative that I was leading. One of the board members said during the Q&A portion of the testimony, she mentioned how her granddaughter, who was in the second grade, recently had told her that she hates math, and she was just flabbergasted and kind of broke my heart a little bit. I was like, a second grader already having that feeling in mathematics? No, but one of the ideas that I shared with her in response to her question was how caretakers, parents, grandparents can use everyday experiences as opportunities to engage with math. But what struck me is how often families need some reassurance that these everyday life situations actually do count as doing math. They can be just as valuable as what students are doing and learning in the mathematics classroom.
That is so true, Dewey. It's so funny because families feel comfortable and they know the importance of why we should engage in reading at home. And it's always breaks my heart a little when people say that, oh, I never liked math or my kid doesn't like math, because we will never go to a meeting where someone will say, well, I can't read. I was never good at reading. But it's acceptable to say, I'm not good at math. So, as you said, we have to help people see that those everyday things that we do are ways that we can engage in mathematical learning and really experience it as part of our daily activities. And so games are a wonderful way to do that. Kids love games. They make up games, and their games have a lot of math and counting and sorting and comparing involved in them. Cooking, shopping, preparing the family budget, and even just bedtime stories that, you share with your kids at bedtime. So these are all moments that caregivers can use to help their children to feel more comfortable about mathematics, to build their confidence, and really change the way children see themselves as learners and doers of mathematics.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the beauty of it is it doesn't really require families to add anything to their busy schedules. Experiences pop up all the time we encounter in our daily lives. And just perhaps being mindful of, hey, maybe this is a chance to talk with my kid about not formally teaching them a math idea, but hey, let's use this opportunity to sort or look at patterns and compare quantities, perhaps. So these are hopefully some ideas that we can share today with families that doesn't require a big heavy lift. We're not necessarily saying, hey, you need to teach some math lessons. That's not what this is about. But it's really about how can we help families notice that math is already around them. The important takeaway, not only for parents, but people in general, is that math doesn't have to have this feeling of being intimidated or feeling that it's out of reach in order for you to be doing math. In fact, it shouldn't feel that way. No, so families can use everyday situations, as we mentioned, as opportunities to talk math with their children. And perhaps they need a little guidance, though, to help them do this intentionally.
Thank you, Dewey, for sharing those ideas. You are so correct that families don't have to take a heavy lift because math is all around us. And so, one of the things that we want to do is help them to intentionally but seamlessly engage in mathematics learning experiences with their families. And that's where today's guest comes in. She's going to share ideas and resources that can help families make math more accessible, joyful, and just a part of our everyday lives. I'm excited to dive into this conversation. So, listeners, let's welcome Holly Kreider. Holly, can you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Of course, thank you, Latrenda, and thank you, Dewey, and thank you to the entire NCTM team for inviting me to your podcast and for shining a light on family engagement in children's math learning, what we shortcut call family math. I am Holly Kreider. I am the director of the Center for Family Math. The center is an initiative under NAFSCE, the National Association for Family, School, and Community Engagement. And at NAFSCE, we're all about high impact policies and practices around family and community partnerships. And the Center for Family Math is all around unlocking both the joy and the power of math through family and community engagement. Got a lot of different strategies that are part of how we try to lift that up, deepening and expanding practice and research and communications and the like. And I came to the Center for Family Math just a few years ago, and I might have been one of those people who muttered, "I'm not a math person." I will never let those words come out of my lips again. But I come from the world of family school partnerships, and it's been so exciting to connect that to children's math learning, and especially to also put on my hat as a mom of two daughters and think about how math has been and continues to be a important part of our lives too. So just really honored to be here.
Well, we are definitely grateful that you're here with us. And so I'm going to piggyback on something you said that you may have been at one time one of those folks who say, I'm not a math person, but we know that we do have a significant number of caregivers who may say this. So, how can we shift that mindset so that they feel more confident supporting their children?
I love that question. And I know in your initial comments, you mentioned this too. I mean, if I had a dollar for every time I heard someone say, I'm not a math person, I'd be a rich woman. I think I want to just distinguish these two things. There's beliefs and there's feelings, right? So there's a lot of negative feelings swirling around about math too. Like 93% of Americans say they have some anxiety about math, for example. And that's not just parents and caregivers, it's also educators. Some educators and the public, especially early educators, have feelings around math. Kids have it, kind of can be a little bit contagious. And I think we have to unpack a lot of those feelings. Then there's beliefs, and the beliefs are things like, I'm not a math person, and some other people are math people, and maybe you're just born that way, and I'm not born that way. This notion of a fixed mindset is just this innate trait that you either have or you don't have, and it's immutable. When in fact, if we can shift our mindsets to think this to more of a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset, and come to realize that everybody can do math and improve and get better at math and learn at math with effort and experience, then that to me is sort of the starting place of shifting, right? I think I might sort of point to a couple of different steps that parents and caregivers, that all of us can think about in starting to feel more confident in engaging kids in math. One is to just reflect, to think about our own feelings, our own beliefs about math, and to have that kind of self-awareness, because that's the first step in behavior change. Some of the things we do with educators and with parents and parent leaders, a mathography, almost like an autobiography around math. Like, what are your personal stories growing up around math, whether it's in school or out of school, and in relation with your own family, and how did that go for you? I mean, there's some baggage there for a lot of people to unpack and be aware of. I think also one of my favorite posters or t-shirts is, are you a math person? Question mark. Well, are you a person? Do you do math of any kind? Then guess what? You too are a math person. I think we need to expand. Part of that is expanding the way we think about math. Is it sort of this narrow, formal math that you learn in the classroom that can sometimes feel disconnected from real life? Is it math all around us and everywhere and every time, like Dewey was talking about? And I think that once you begin to open up your eyes to the world of everything that is math, then it's harder to say you're not a math person. You know what I mean? Then the other thing that I find useful, and it's been so fun to kind of generate like counter messages to flip that script from, I'm not a math person, or I can't do this, or this is so hard, or I don't get it, or this doesn't mean anything to me, is to try and think of what are those counter messages we can have in our hip pocket when we encounter anybody who says, I'm not a math person, or expresses some kind of frustration or confusion or negative feelings and beliefs around math. And I was with this group of educators. They could very conveniently add the word yet to a negative statement like, oh, I can't do this problem. It's so hard. I don't know what to do yet. Right? Like, if you think that you can, that just means I need to gather more information or get a little bit more support, try a different way, and then I might get it. There was another educator who said, well, we're in the learning pit, but we're going to get out together. You can do hard things. These are things that we need to tell ourselves as parents, as educators. And then we want to be able to say to kids too, practice, practice, practice is another great little mantra that flips to that growth mindset. The more you do it, the more you're going to get out of it. So one of my favorite things to do in groups of adults is to say, what's your math superpower? It's a little complicated because it does kind of smack of like a magical quality that maybe you're just born with or get from whatever, being struck by lightning. But it's so revealing for adults to reflect on, oh, I guess I do have some superpowers. And so I'll model and say, well, I can use the back of my hand to tell a child's temperature on their forehead within a tenth of a degree Fahrenheit. And then, aha, you have that math superpower. I have one too. I can tell the exact size of Tupperware I need for leftovers. That's some serious spatial mathematics right there. And then you can kind of get people to think a little bit differently about it for themselves. Then that's the starting point, isn't it? For feeling more confident about engaging with your own and other people's kids around it. So that's my spiel.
I absolutely love those ideas. And just that kind of adding on something like yet at the end of a sentence that seems to kind of convey a negative message does change it around. It provokes someone to kind of think there's more, it's not the end of the story. That totally changes the perspective. When families think about supporting learning at home, perhaps they tend to kind of lean towards reading as something kind of their first response to do. Super important. People have a bit more comfort being able to support their child with reading, perhaps. How might we help them see that math is not only equally important, but also doable?
Yeah, I really appreciate that because I think that reading and literacy, it's kind of out there in the ether, right? And we have a lot of ways of talking about it. And math is, we don't really have read 10 minutes at night with your child, easy answered for families, but there are easy answers. There really are. So I want to just break your question down because you talk both about like the importance, why it's important to kind of engage at home with your child around math and how it's doable. And that importance thing, like I was a convert to math myself when I read this one research study by Greg Duncan and colleagues that showed that kids' early math skills at entrance to kindergarten predict eighth grade academic achievement even more than early literacy skills do at kindergarten. And they predict not only kids' math achievement at eighth grade, they also predict kids' reading achievement at eighth grade. So if that's true, if we care about how kids are doing in reading and math at eighth grade, we better pay attention to how they're doing at math as early as the beginning of kindergarten. And that was something I didn't know. And when I share that, just that one piece of really rigorous research with families and even early educators, it's news for them. And so just a way of responding to your question around the importance of math. And there's a fair amount of emerging research that shows that when families are engaged in kids' math, it leads to positive math outcomes for kids, whether that's math talk, math interactions, having a rich home environment with books and games and mathish things, connecting with school. Those things can predict kids' math skills. So families matter in this equation, so to speak. In terms of making it doable for families, same way it's so easy to think about literacy, how can we make it feel easy around math and doable? I think the big message is math is everywhere. It's everywhere. It's all the time. It's there for us to just discover and explore together. We have a Family Math Parent Advisory Council, and these are parents who are parent leaders in their own community, and they are really champions around engaging families in kids' math. And they developed this guide completely on their own by parents for parents called Make It Math. And what's so cool about this parent guide is it just walks you through your day, like in the kitchen, in the laundry room, running around doing errands, going to the library. Dewey, you talked about sorting things. You can sort socks while you're doing laundry. You can sort silverware while you're putting dishes away. There's so much in everyone's everyday life. It's already patterns, numbers, shapes, analyzing data. And that is just being able to kind of unhook that, I think, and have families see, wow, that's already captured in what I do as a parent or caregiver. That to me is the number one way of feeling like it's doable, both in terms of shoving it into our busy schedules, but also doing it in terms of, oh, I already know how to do this and I already am doing it. It's just about pumping up that math talk and those math concepts and math play inside of those activities.
This episode is sponsored by Prodigy, the online math game voted #1 by kids. The state challenge is on. Compete as a school for over $1 million in available prizes, including over $200,000 in tech grants. Teachers, sign up for free today at prodigygame.com/state challenge.
Holly, you just did a great job of providing us with examples of how caregivers can turn everyday activities into opportunities to see, experience, and just enjoy mathematics for the beauty that it is. So let's think about children and how they view mathematics. So, how can incorporating math into those everyday routines help us think about that second grader that Dewey referenced his friend talked about? How can we use those everyday routines to change how children view mathematics long term to help them to see themselves as learners and doers of mathematics?
So, some of my favorite ways that families can turn everyday activities into for math learning. I mean, I'll just say start with what kids are interested in and what they're passionate about. I was hearing from my colleague Michelle, her daughter ordered her first Labubu, little stuffies in the mail, and was really rooting for her favorite Labubu doll. And she and her mom calculated, she's 6, calculated the likelihood that she would get her favorite. Now, there's 8 different Labubu dolls, so they kind of calculated that she had a 1 in 8 chance of getting the one she loved. Of course, she didn't get the one she loved, but her expectation had been set appropriately to know. And I think if we lean in, I've got this neighbor whose son is just entering 2nd grade, and he generously offered to beta test a family math backpack that we're preparing as part of a partnership pilot project we're doing in Los Angeles with a whole lot of really amazing partners, California Masonic Foundation, Raising a Reader, Power My Learning, Partnership for LA Schools. Anyway, so I bring this backpack with these gorgeous books and this card games like subitizing cards. And he kind of tossed the cards on the couch and he said, Pokemon cards have a lot of math in them, Holly. And I said, is that right? And he said, you can do addition, subtraction, multiplication. His mom's kind of raising the eyebrow like, wait, what? Who knew? I didn't know this about Pokemon cards, but he was a Pokemon expert and could tell me that there's so much math to be had in there. It's cracked me up, but it just was a great reminder that we just should start with where kids' interests and passions are. And I think cement this for the long term in terms of kids viewing mathematics as part of their lives long term.
Those are great examples. And it actually reminds me of when I was growing up, my father loved baseball. So he loved watching baseball games all the time. And I would often watch a baseball game with him. And I remember hearing, you'd see how they have the baseball batting statistics. I remember as a kid seeing like, oh, his batting average is 0.314, let's say. And then they would say, oh, and he's 1 for 4 today. There's so many numbers that the commentators are throwing out there. And I never really made connections between these things. Like, how can his batting average be this, but he's 1 for 4, but says 0.3? And I remember in math class, we were converting fractions to decimals. And then I remember doing this one conversion, and it was something like around a 3, for example. And then I made the connection, go, oh, that's the batting average. Oh, that's what that batting average means. You hear them talk about his batting average is 341. And I'm like, what does that really mean in this context? And I was like, wow, I was able to make that connection. But a lot of children might not be able to see that. Even the way we talk about numbers doesn't really convey what they mean, but there's all these connections.
I love that example of connecting it back to classroom math too. It made a story from my own childhood. So I was the child of an accountant, not my dad, but my mom, which was a little bit unusual to have a mom who was a CPA when I was little. I couldn't have been more than like 9 years old, sitting at the kitchen table. And she one day just plopped 3 of her check registers in front of me and said, I'll give you $1 a month if you can balance my checkbook. And that became one of my childhood activities, one of my chores. And it was so important that she was asking me to balance the family checkbook as she gave me her adding machine and everything. It was crazy. And it was hard, but it felt really important. I was helping with the family's finances. And, to this day, I'm irresponsible when it comes to managing my own family's finances because I've tried it and learned it. And I know I'm capable of it. That kind of the relevance and the meaning and the importance around math in your everyday life, that can be an inspiring thing that you carry forward as well.
I remember my mom, probably she just wanted me to get out of the house. And so she would tell me, go to the backyard, and she would pay me a penny for every weed I pulled out of the backyard. I went to work. I was like, a penny a weed? Okay. I would pile them up and count them out. Those are great examples. So I can relate to your example for sure. So how can we help families help their children see themselves as math people from an early age?
I think it's just really about naming the math as it's happening in everyday interactions with children. I think it's encouraging it, it's asking about it, it's having curiosity, you know what I mean? And it's not necessarily saying, hey, you're a math person, so and so. More like something, if they'll carry it along, more a way of approaching the world and thinking about how they can apply it in their lives too. I think your example about baseball, my example about balancing a check, I think those are the things that if we tag the label of math to that and kids understand that what they're doing is mathematical, we're starting to build that identity and that confidence from the get-go. And I think there's other things too, like these ideas about persistence, like when kids sort of run into something that feels a little bit tricky, and we can say, well, I used to have this thing with my daughter, my younger daughter, who has significant learning differences. She'd come to me and say, I don't know how to do this thing. And she'd be really frustrated. And I'd say, well, did you try it at least 3 times? Yes. Did you try it a different way? And if the answer was still yes, and she still couldn't figure it out, I'm like, did you ask somebody besides your mom for help? And we used that for mathematics, but we used it for everything. That became something she could carry with her as she got older, know how to persist through challenge. And I think that's a part of math too. Mathematics is about taking different perspectives. It's about trying different approaches. And having that flexibility and persistence is really important as you get into more advanced mathematics and things might feel, intimidating sometimes.
In listening to our conversation here, both of you shared examples from your experience as children with things that you did at home that were related to mathematics. But really, those were things to me that really laid the foundation for having just a lifelong connection between seeing math that you might do in school to how you see math in the real world. So you actually see a purpose and meaning for that. When we think about families and supporting them, let's think about how our students spend most of their day in school and in the classroom. So, what can teachers do at the start of the school year to help families really feel like they're partners in their child's math journey? What can educators do to help establish that partnership relationship to help them make that connection?
I love that question. And I'm just like a firm believer that like teachers and any other family facing professionals can be really credible messengers and partners to families across the board in learning. And that teachers are so important for encouraging families to do math with their kids, especially when in the context of different unproductive beliefs or negative feelings around math, like particularly for this topic. So I think at that 30,000 feet level, at the Center for Family Math, we've been starting to develop, it's not even hot off the press yet. We've been developing this framework, this set of family math core competencies for educators and others who really want to partner with families around kids' math learning. And we've been talking to, we call them unicorns, but professionals that are already in this space, like in the family engagement space and in the math learning space, like really kind of bringing that together. And we're sort of starting to shape up this set of competencies like knowledge and skills and dispositions that are helpful for professionals in their partnerships with families around math. And the very first competency is reflection. And we already talked about this a little bit, right? Think about your own mindset. Think about families' mindsets. Start from there to inform the way you relate to families around this topic. Appreciate the math that families and communities are already doing in their everyday lives. Have an expansive view of math, right? We talked about that too. Math starts early. Math is more than just counting. It's also about shapes and time and space and patterns and analysis, all the good things. So reflect is the first thing I would say. Then the second thing is really about connect. And that's just really about understanding your role as a teacher as one that can open doors for families to engage in math and meet families where they are, both physically and where they are emotionally and mentally around it, and then making math really approachable and fun because it is and can be that way. And the approachable part is the math that's already happening. Let's understand what that is and let's build on that. And then like creating more access for families. Like maybe it's the library, the children's museum, the classroom, the school. There's community resources, all the internet. There's all these different ways that families can have increased access to math content and math activities to do with their kids. So reflect, connect. That third competency is collaborate. And to me, this is about actionable ideas and practices and resources that families can use. Real world ways to kind of extend classroom learning at home, help families understand their kids' math progress at school, making that all really clear and concrete for families. And we talked earlier about literacy, and I think what if it were something as easy as spend 10 minutes a few nights a week playing games with your child? That's so digestible and concrete and actionable in a way that I think a lot of families could really wrap their head around that. And then our final competency is around leading and leading alongside families. So, as educators, thinking of family math more kind of from a systems role, or like, so let's say at the school level, are there policies and practices in place that really support family engagement in mathematics and partnering with the school? What kind of professional development experiences are available to you as an educator or your peers to learn more about how to do this? And then if we think really systems, like think about pre-K to 12 mathematics as this pathway or multiple pathways, a kind of confusing pipeline for families to navigate, especially as the kids get older and you have to think about advanced mathematics and algebra through calculus and data sciences and statistics, and what do we choose? Will it mean for my kids' long-term success and options? So helping families navigate that system, I think, can be another important role for teachers and other educators to take. If we were to kind of move down from that 30,000 degree level and talk more about the essence of relationships between educators and families around math, I would just say whenever you're interacting with a family, just start from a place of curiosity and ask a few questions like, what's your favorite family game to play? Or what's your favorite recipe to cook together? Or how do you use math at your job? How do you feel about math? I think those can be places to open up a little bit of ideas and excitement around math in terms of elucidating the math that's happening in school. A lot of families will say, I don't understand this new math, maybe because it's different from how they learned in their generation or in their home country. And I think just being really clear and explaining the approach and the purpose of it, and actually how there is probably some alignment with the way that you learn math after all, and that there are many ways to learn, and that's all good. But being really clear and explaining that to families, there are a lot of families we hear from who are just like, I don't understand the homework. I don't understand the approach. And so I think teachers have a really important role to help families kind of grasp that. And then finally, just be accessible, right? This is just family engagement writ large. What's the easiest way to contact me as a teacher? And just invite those questions as a building block of relationships in general. I mentioned this Family Math Parent Advisory Council, and we put together this family math toolbox. It's all these practice resources for families, for educators. You can search it by language or by age range and grade range. But before we put those resources from the field, not just from us, on our website, we ran them through our parent leaders. And they kind of came up with this important rubric. Is it accessible? Can I get it in my home language? Can I download it easily? Is it engaging? Is it interesting? Or is it like a 50-page report? And is it inclusive? Do I see families like my family? Are the cultural experiences and wisdoms that are part of my history reflected somehow, even just in the photographs? And so when you're thinking about resources, activities, questions to ask, think about those things: accessible, engaging, inclusive. And then you'll be good to go.
Holly, I'd like to kind of circle back to something you mentioned earlier. You specifically talked about persistence as something to help students develop. And I think one thing that we can help parents understand, or just people in general, this idea about doing math or being a math person, it's not just about computing and solving word problems and doing algebraic type of equations. A really important element to doing mathematics and being a math person is mindset, how you approach things, and just this idea that we want students to recognize, we want adults, parents to recognize that, yeah, I might not know the answer or how to do this, but hey, let's try. This idea of, hey, let's just jump in, let's see what happens. I think too often, because of people's past experiences learning mathematics, they have this fear of kind of just jumping in and doing it. So I love the ideas you're sharing. Explicitly address this idea that doing math and being a math person, it's not just the computations you do or the things you think you recognize from a math textbook, but it's also these mindsets that we want to instill in children. You mentioned specifically earlier this idea of, I want my child to believe that, hey, I can do hard things. Howie Hua, he's a college mathematics professor. He talks about, that's a lesson he tries to instill in his students who are in college. So thinking about those ideas, what are some experiences that you've seen that might help families not only enjoy math together, but have that experience of developing these kind of mindsets around persistence, or they can do together?
Yeah, I love that as a frame for fun and challenging in a good way. I'm really a fan of games, and I think family math nights can definitely be rebranded as family game nights in schools sometimes because games are so magical in so many ways. You can do math operations, you can have strategy, puzzles too. Like, think about a puzzle. Sometimes you got to take a little break and then you got to come back and search through the sea of blue puzzle pieces to find the one that's slightly aquamarine that's going to fit right where you need it to fit. And what are your strategies? The car game, but great. I learned this game not too long ago from our co-leads at the Erickson Institute, Latrenda and Dr. Jennifer McCrae, and called NIM, NIM. Maybe you all are familiar with it, where you just take little paper clips or Cheerios or any kind of counters, and you've got to pull from a little group and by threes or by fives, but whoever's left with the last paper clip loses whatever it is. That takes some serious strategy. You have to play it a number of times in order to figure out how to set yourself up for success at the end. That right there is just persistence. Games are great for that. I am still very much about the warm and fuzzy too. And that is why I'm a little bit of a champion around the storybooks. And whether it's math explicit themed storybooks or other wordless books, books where the math is more implicit. As I mentioned this family math, this California Family Math Initiative we're doing, where we're just flooding the zone at home, right? Games, storybooks, everyday routines, like app kind of delivered activities that still just require objects at home where you can kind of get that everyday math. I think another place where you can discover like a lot of math and dig into it is in the community, whether that's through doing a community walk. I was thinking of even with older kids, that algebra project. I watched this video not too long ago about a group of youth who were learning about the civil rights history of their community. And then they created a timeline. And then they were able to use that as kind of the building blocks for learning algebra. But it was really meaningful and important to the students. And that became like a completely new opening for appreciating math and its meaning in their own lives and their community.
This has been a delightful, delightful conversation about one of my favorite topics. And so, Holly, you've mentioned some of these things throughout the course of our conversation. And so, just at this time, as we get ready to wrap up our conversation today, is thinking about where can families find resources. I've heard you reference some of the toolkits that your group is working on. And I love that you mentioned that it's a collaboration of things from other folks. So maybe if you can identify like a couple of resources, maybe your three go-to resources that you would suggest for families to help support their child's math learning at home.
Yeah, happy to. Well, certainly the Center for Family Math. Families could go to familymath.org. We have a really easy URL and scooch over to the practice tab. And as I mentioned, there's this family math toolbox. So that has all sorts of goodies from across the field that families could look at. And they could find resources in Spanish. They could find resources for younger kids or older kids, easy peasy. I know NCTM has a web page that's focused on family engagement, so I'll give a shout out to that. There, especially for younger children, engaging in mathematics with younger children, there are some other really great resources. Stanford Dream Project, DREME, they have got a whole host of wonderful resources for families. EDC is another place. They have lots of different games that you could play with your kid, and they have videos showing how you play those games. PBS SoCal, Southern California, they have all sorts of things. They've got a YouTube channel with mathy songs. They have a cooking show with a kid and a mom, like cooking together. They just have so many fun resources for families that are really engaging. And of course, there's all sorts of public television shows for little kids that have lots of math, like Work It Out Wombats. I happen to love Work It Out Wombats, even though I'm 57. Anyway, so I would suggest those. I think as kids get older and like the school math, sometimes families feel a little bit intimidated. And I think our message here today is you don't have to know all of the math yourselves. We can, as families, we can help navigate our kids to other people and other places to help support their math learning at school. And so Khan Academy, Zern, Latrenda, Shakia Bland at Just Equations. One of her favorite sites that she points people to is desmos.com. So there's lots of different places online that you can go to that have sort of some reliable support. I'm really a big fan of the Math Narrative Project, which is really all about how to talk about math with youth. Really powerful, whether you're an educator or family, has messages that are oriented to different audiences. And then again, I'll just give a nod out to like all the resources in any family's community, whether that's the library, children's museums, your own child's school. Like these are all places where you can find some ideas, resources, support for engaging in your kids' math learning.
That is a wealth of resources. And so thank you for mentioning NCTM. So specifically, let's point out a few places if our listeners are not sure where to find those. Some linked in that president's message that we talked about, but also one that is tried but true is Figure This. As students get older, sometimes families are not sure about how to be that true partner. I personally love Figure This. This is linked on the NCTM website. And so it starts with middle school math, but it has a lot of foundational content that's very helpful for students with algebraic thinking and algebraic reasoning. And so it's a great engaging set of activities for families to engage in. One of the other things we know that some families find comfort in using something that they feel that they are successful in, like using literature and literature books. NCTM, along with NCTE, the National Council of Teachers of English, we are partners with the Mathical organization. What I love about Mathical is Mathical, just like magical, is it's literature for children ages 3 through high school. And so it's good literature, but all of the literature features math. And so you can check those resources out because it gives you an opportunity to share a love of literature, but also for students to see how math is used in the real world on a regular basis and to make those connections and those applications.
Yeah, I think just to add to your list, Latrenda, there is just the Notice and Wonder resources. Those are fun ones. And on the website, I think there's 3 short videos explaining the Notice and Wonder characters. And a lot of the resources are intended more for classroom use, for teachers to use. However, families, caretakers they can watch those videos just to get an idea about, well, yeah, how are some ways we can use this idea of notice and wonder just to have conversations with their children in everyday life experiences.
Great example. Notice and wonder, I love. Time flies when you're having fun. Listeners, we definitely want to thank you for joining us on this episode of Adding It All Up. Please do not forget to subscribe on your favorite podcasting service. Please share with everyone in your math community, in your family community, and let's keep this conversation going. Thank you.
This episode is sponsored by Prodigy. Teachers, bring epic math motivation, school spirit, and prizes to your school with the State Challenge. With over $1 million available to be won and new winners every month, your school could be the next state champion. Learn more at prodigygame.com/state challenge. Thank you for listening to this episode of Adding It All Up. At NCTM, we strive to bring you the biggest topics happening in mathematics. Join us next month for another exciting discussion.